Morning. Today we're looking at Proverbs chapter 4, verse 10 to 27, and it follows the line of our theme from last week around pursuing wisdom and how wisdom begins with the fear or the reverence of the Lord. And so in chapter 4, we have a father talking to a son, and he's giving his son advice so he may have a successful life that is long. So how will it be a long life and successful? He must, number one, choose. So in this passage, two paths are set out. The first is the path of the righteousness or the way of wisdom. The second is the path of the wicked or evil. And the father warns the son, and in doing so, he also warns you and I that there are two choices here. To walk the path of righteousness and wisdom means, verse 13, you'll keep hold of instruction, do not let go, guard her. Wisdom is being personified as a woman, for she, wisdom, is your life. So to draw this out a little bit, to live in obedience of God, to hold to his instruction, is in fact to trust that your life depends on it. That there is a sense of gravity, and that for us that this is no small matter. We need to take wisdom or the fear of the Lord very seriously. And so if you've lived long enough, you'll know that your sin has consequences, and the sins of others has consequences on others. And so to live in success, to truly live, is in fact to hold to God's instruction in obedience. Not in the way we think of a life that is embodied by enjoyment, and with the idea of thinking that God's rules are some sort of limiter to living life to the full. But we must acknowledge we will only truly experience joy and life when we are living God's way as God's people. Of course, the internal thrills of getting what we want, what the sinful person inside wants, does not always feel wrong. That's why sin is so powerful. But to live in God's way, to live in wisdom, is the way to true life. So what does that look like? Well, our lives are evidence that our joys and our wants are not aligned to God's. So we need this guidance. It means practical reminders that God's grace, love and peace that only He gives would transform us every day. We need that transformation, trust in that transformation of God that He gives every day. Whether that be in the office with bad colleagues or at school where there's bad behavior, perhaps at uni or friendship circles, around lifestyles and choices that you know aren't right in God's eyes, that they are doing, which is normalized, but may not be for you. And so rather than jump in with the bad behavior at work or in circles, we are to ask God for help to enjoy and hold to what He defines as life-giving, which is not that popular in the world. And that also forces us to remember the promises of God in those times, to pray, to sing, or speak them over our situations or our temptations and weaknesses. It's not easy to walk the path of righteousness or wisdom, but Proverbs here states that it is the path of the well-lived. Even popular health or lifestyle books will tell you discipline is key to a life you love. And God is saying in the same way, discipline is key and to a life that you love, but it is within His teachings and His wisdom that He gives. And so we're encouraged to place what you love as the wisdom of God, because of the love that He gave to you and me in His Son. So He's asking us to place what we love as wisdom, which is His wisdom, which is provided to us in His Son, and therefore it motivates our hearts to pursue Him, and His commandments become a joy rather than a life limiter. It sounds simple, but it's very hard to apply in everyday scenarios. But it's possible also because God uses people who stray to the other path to show His wisdom and power in our lives. And that's the power of the gospel. He uses people like you and me who stray, who walk down wrong paths, who become blind to the lanes that we're driving in. And he uses us to be a window to the gospel for our encouragement. So we are surprised at the power of the gospel in our lives, but for the encouragement of others, for those around us, for God's people around us as well. And so that's why verse 18 says, the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, which shines brighter and brighter until the day ends. But the way of the wicked is like deep darkness. They do not know over what they stumble. Which leads us to verses 20 to 27. The life of the Christian, and this is the last part, the life of the Christian will be successful, number one, which we've learned, if you choose the path of wisdom or righteousness or right living. And lastly, number two, if you concentrate. Verse 20, my son, be attentive to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. Let them not escape your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them, and healing to all their flesh. And then the father goes on to tell the son, you need to concentrate, you need to be focused. Keep an eye on where your feet or your eyes are going. Don't turn to evil, rather turn away from it. But in order to do so, you need to be alert, so you have to concentrate. And that's actually quite relatable. Our phone and our feet votes for our hearts are, right? Do your eyes go where they shouldn't, or do your feet go where they shouldn't? And if you're like me, you have said yes to the two questions just then, which is why all the more we need to take the gravity of choosing wisdom and knowing that if we don't concentrate, wisdom will swap itself for foolishness. How often do we see Christians or good people go too far with their sense of righteousness, so that they actually miss the gospel? They start drawing up a line of what holy living looks like, and that example is usually maybe their own. How often do we notice ourselves in our time of weakness as well fall in sin? Yet even in our sin, we are called to be a people who choose and concentrate on true wisdom, to look at Jesus, our righteousness, for our sin. And therefore we're to take the gravity of fearing and revering the word, not with guilt, but with joy. Not to take those rules as a way of shame and limiting, but a way of a doorway to life. And so we are to see the commandments of God and to live in his wisdom with joy, just like our Lord did. And we see that in Hebrews 12, verse 1 to 2. It says, therefore, he's just listed all the faithful witnesses from Old Testament. Since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, concentrating on Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith. He's the one who perfects and founds it, or establishes it, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. And so our God is seated at the right hand of God. He looks to us, the people who look left and right, and he says, look to me. By the grace I give, concentrate and focus on who I am for you. And then by grace, choose the life I give, for that is true living. And that is where we find true life, in our Lord, who is our founder and perfecter of our faith. And that's our joy this morning.